All right. We're getting, yeah, that's yours.
Oh, it's mine?
Yeah.
Those are extras. Yeah, I'll keep it here for when Bob walks in.
Bob Victor, you mean?
Yeah.
All right. It's very simple. We're still on the estimation work, and what we're going to do is try using it. First, we'll just work our way right through the packet. First, we have the horoscope of Margaret Thatcher, which is the horoscope that we're working with. And on the back side, we have the horoscope of Woody Allen, which we're going to work with the next time. Then we have the aspect worksheet of Margaret Thatcher, and on the back side, Woody Allen. Then we have for Margaret Thatcher, we have the workup to the planets. And then on the other side is the strength of planet sheet. Then we did the same for Woody Allen, except now the Woody Allen corrected all of the errors that we found last time. There were 2 errors, and they were down with Neptune and I think Neptune and Pluto, something like that. One was Uranus. But now the errors are corrected, and in the planet house considerations under K, we thought that that was an error, but it was not. And the reason that that is there is because in the Woody Allen chart, Neptune rules 2 successive cusps, and that gives it a little bit more room. All right, then we had what we did last time. The aspect analysis for all of the solar aspects. The Sun conjoined Mercury being the strongest, and then a Sun sextile Neptune being the next strongest, and then the Sun square Pluto, and then the Sun square Jupiter. And the final sheets are what we're going to do this time. We're looking at the top 4 aspects. We're looking at the Jupiter opposite Pluto, the Mercury sextile Neptune, the Saturn trine Pluto, and the Jupiter sextile Saturn. Because if we look down the aspect worksheet, we see that those 4 aspects are the strongest. So what we're going to look at is those 4 aspects, and then we're going to look at those 4 aspects relative to the solar aspects that we looked at last time to try to understand her life, because we'd be looking at the most important things, and we would be looking at the way she sees herself and her self-image. So we begin with Pluto opposite, Jupiter opposite Pluto. Jupiter is the strongest planet. Pluto is the second strongest planet, and without correction for octaves, it would be the strongest. So we have the 2 strongest planets in the strongest aspect. So this...
Jupiter, this is Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, Margaret Thatcher, Jupiter opposite Pluto. It should be the 3rd from the last page. And it's a very good thing when there is complete balance. Because sometimes if an aspect is not strong, but it has to deal with strong planets, it falters. The tool, you might say, that each of the planets is trying to use is not strong enough to take the weight of astrological force being given by the strong planet. So this is a balanced tool. strong players with a strong tool. If we look at the work, Jupiter represents ideas, expansion, positivity, philosophy. Pluto rules opinion, power, fixity, reaction. So what we have is a fixed philosophy as a composite, a very opinionated philosophy, and it's very reactionary, the ideas that it has. In short, Pluto, Jupiter, negative aspects are the strongest aspects for prejudice. The moon Jupiter is the second strongest that I've seen for prejudice. So we have, she's in a milieu of prejudice, and she has these forces working on her. We're going to come back to this more in a little bit when we work with some of the other factors, some of the other aspects too. It is a malefic, so it's a decided negative activity. Perhaps she has, with this, a misconstrued view of life. And since it's an opposition, it's like she develops her prejudices by having to counter, being involved, like it's like the two-party system almost in England, like it is in the United States here. And if you develop your political philosophy under that, you're always developing your opinion or your outlook relative to the opposition, rather than just looking at reality for itself. You're in a struggle, and that's how things develop. The relative strength, there is balance, so that the ideas and the opinions that she has are equal. It would take it like if Pluto were decidedly stronger, the negativity of it, or the destructive darkness about the aspect, would take over, and Jupiter would then serve, and it would have a flavor that was much more Plutonian than Jupiterian, and the ideas would be serving the prejudice rather than the two forces vying with each other in equality. If we look at the signification, everything happens in cardinal signs. So it looks like there's a lot of action here. And because it's an opposition, there's a lot of back and forth. I can understand in the consciousness this being someone who bounces back and forth between ideas and opinions, feeding each other, probably. It's earth and water, and the earth and water signs are much more tangible signs, and there's less likelihood for it to be in complete abstraction. Like if the elements were fire and air, there would be much more of an abstracting tendency, and not the dealing with things that are, you can feel, tangible things. The signs are Capricorn and Cancer, and those are the two most traditional signs in the zodiac. The Cancer part being the lineage, following the lineage of those that came before, and the Capricorn part is like a social tradition, not so much a familiar tradition. So we can see that this is a philosophy that is, there's a...
So, I have a question.
Yes.
Under the...
We're in the third from the last page.
Yeah, under the signification, you've got air, water.
For the Jupiter opposite Pluto? No.
If I got the right page.
No, you're not on the right page.
Third last page, you said.
Yeah. the front side of it.
Third last page.
Yeah,
Okay, each side is a page.
Right here.
but that's Sun Pluto. This is where we are. Looking at where the opportunities come in through domification, both planets are in succedent houses. And this means that she acquires her political opinions through taking on responsibilities and in the struggle over responsibilities. The triad, the Jupiter is in a professional house and Pluto's in a solutional house. So it's a career as a problem solver, and that's probably what she feels about it. The second and the eighth, this is where the most controversial part of her life work is, gains and losses. She did a lot of things to streamline government because the Labor Party, the socialist-leaning party, had been in power for such a long time, and a lot of stuff built up. And she was instrumental in washing that away, basically. Application, it is applying. And that means that in terms of the opinions that are involved in this, it looks like that her opinions are likely to become more and more thoroughly built into herself as life goes on. And it's first phase, so she's likely to want to build a new reactionary structure. And the special case, we have a special case this time. Pluto's in its own house, and that might suggest something that she is not even aware of. It's, you know, like you've got to destroy something to save it kind of consciousness is like what Pluto is in the 8th house is like, except that it's not conscious. It's something that works deep within her more unconscious being. Now we're going to come back to this and that topic in just a second, but let's look at the next aspect.
You're going to talk about that she has a desire to save things, but it's dark?
Yes, thinks she's saving things by destroying. You know, like in order to save the Vietnam syndrome, in order to save a city, we had to destroy it. You know, we had to clean out all of the vermin. That kind of a thing is what that viewpoint can be. All right, I'm going to skip the next aspect for a few seconds because I want to get to the other aspects that involve Pluto and Jupiter. So let's go to the next page, the Saturn trine Pluto. And Saturn is a number 3 planet, Pluto is a number 2 planet, and the aspect is the number 3. So we have something that's pretty similar. It's not quite as intense as the opposition, but it is every bit as balanced. So it's very hard to, this is someone that is set and stable. You know, the opposition between Jupiter and Pluto had the back and forth quality and hard to maintain balance, but this is something that is steady and very, very hard to overturn. The work, if we look at the Saturn represents time and negation and caution. Pluto indicates darkness and power and reaction. So what we have is we have the darkest of all combinations. Saturn-Pluto combinations are the darkest that you can find. Ooh, there's conscious mess. What a Freudian slip there. Woo! And it's an accomplishment of things because it is a trine, but it's an accomplishment of things by covering all bases. What we have are Pluto and Saturn are the two planets that are the most controlling planets. And this is somebody that does what she does and has success through these things by just holding things into control. It's a benefic, so there is something that comes easy to her. It's something that has a quality of I know this already sort of thing, like the discipline that she has. This is obviously a discipline. Discipline and control seem to go hand in hand in most people. And the specific aspect is trine, and that's very much perfection. So this is a very, very old thing in her consciousness. The relative strength, because there's balance, neither planet gives a special flavor to it. It's like both planets are equally engaged in working together as perfectly as they can. Oh boy, another construct. Typos all over the place. By signification, it's a fixed cardinal. And fixed cardinal combinations are momentum. So we have a perfecting mechanism that is through control that builds up momentum. It's both planets are in water signs, and that gives the trine not just only perfection, it gives a smoothness. Water has the quality of being soothing and smoothing and rounding things off. In fact, the features of water sign risings are likely to be rounded. And Scorpio and Cancer both have strong parental qualities. That says where the Jupiter-Pluto had the quality of tradition, this has a quality of parental. By angularity, it's cadent and succedent, and so she has to deal with responsibilities vicarious that are not her own personally, but it is for others. This is exactly what you would expect in somebody involved with politics and government. The triad, it's solutional, and she's very definitely somebody who had this best quality, the best positive aspect that she has basically in the chart is something that's involved with solving problems, and solving problems by controlling them and by maintaining a steady, even control and doing things in a way that stabilize everything. A triangle, it's kind of hard to tip over a triangle. All right, by the houses, it's the 8th and the 12th. And the 4th house, which is the house of solving personal problems, is not of big importance. That's where her weakest planet is in the 4th house. So she's mostly interested in societal problems or problems that involve others. It's applying, so this is, whenever Saturn is involved, it's something that develops slowly, and she eases into perfection of power, of being able to control things. It's something that she builds and builds slowly. It's a first phase again. It's a new way to solve old problems with old ideas, I guess you might say it. And Pluto in the 8th, it shows that same quality, only here in the trine. It's sort of like this is somebody that's willing to pull the rug out from under in order to clean house. But with the trine, it's sort of like one of those things where you have a table full of dishes and you pull the tablecloth out from under them and everything stands all right. At least that's what her hope is. All right, now let's turn the page and go to the last aspect of this part, and that is the Jupiter sextile Saturn. Jupiter's again the strongest planet. we have the fourth strongest aspect, so the aspect might not be able to hold up to everything that Jupiter wants to do because it's strong. And Saturn is the third strongest planet. If you look by percentages, there's a moderate imbalance, not a severe imbalance, but a moderate one. And this shows that Jupiter gets expansive beyond Saturn. And it wants, it gets excited by ideas and wants to work on them or act on them immediately, whether things are right or not. Planet number 1, expansion, ideas, positivity. Planet number 2, contraction, hard data, and negativity. So we can see that this is an aspect of judgment. These are planetary opposites. And Jupiter always judges with the big of things, and Saturn always judges to the letter of the law. And so there is here between almost somebody who's willing to float away in abstraction and something that brings things down to earth. And usually that's a very good complementation, especially in a sextile. But looking at the quality, it's benefic, so she does have the good in mind. And it is a sextile, so it indicates a certain amount of versatility, but the sextile is more akin to Jupiter than it is to Saturn, not only because of the strength of Jupiter, but because of the nature of the sextile being reflective and the nature of Jupiter being reflective. So what we have here is a tendency to be a little bit stronger about the ideas and the enthusiasm about the ideas than with the caution. But mind you, the pivot planet in this is Saturn, and Saturn has all the caution from the trine, so that trine of Saturn to Pluto brings a balance almost to the Jupiter Saturn sextile, because all of the caution of the trine makes for more strength than Saturn would have if it were just a naked sextile between Saturn and Jupiter. You get where we're going in this, you get sort of the idea now. It's a cardinal fixed again. It's sort of a pivoting off of things so that, the Jupiter-Pluto is sort of like a dead center. When you have two really strong planets opposite each other, they don't budge, and they get dead centered. And the sextile allows a pivoting off of that by reflecting off of it. Elements, Jupiter is in earth and Saturn is in water, so we have something like the texture of mud. The signs are Capricorn and Scorpio, and this adds another element of caution so that the Jupiter can't get really too much out of bounds and get carried away too much. So we see that there's caution from the signs, whereas with the trine between Saturn and Pluto, the caution was between the planets. The angularity it's a succedent house. Jupiter is succedent in the second house, and Saturn is cadent in the 12th house. And so like it's an impersonal responsibility, some kind of a universal responsibility. The triad, it's professional and solutional. Again, we have that same notion of a problem solver. And the second and the 12th is somebody that has to deal with hangover problems that come from the past that are fiscal and wanting to do something about it and having a basically positive attitude about it. Let's check and see that the mic is still working. Oh, yeah, okay. A little bit weak. Tonight's the last night on this one. All right, it's separating, and it's sort of a waning from the judgment of Saturn and Jupiter is acute, but it's waning, And I think that might be an attitude, just let things play out for themselves. You know, you don't have to always take things in hand. Sometimes you just let them play out and they take care of themselves. Sort of like in my garden. You can harvest things out of the garden, like those garlic scapes that I like so much. You can take them and put them in a bag and look at the bag months later and they'll have gone to flower and gone to seed because the process has been started and they just let it carry out and play out. And that's the feeling that I get with the separation here. It's a first phase, and again, this is a solutional founder. And this is, again, planetary opposites. So it's a reflective from the sextile resolution of by you looking at the large and small of things. All right, now this is the very simple analysis of three aspects. But these three aspects form a pattern. They form a 30, 60, 90 triangle. The triangle, you know, Saturn is the hinge planet in that it aspects both planets in the opposition. And so what you can see is there are two very good aspects involving Saturn and involving control. And they're both working on the two ends of an opposition, which is a struggle. And this indicates a kind of thing where it could be one of either or both. It's either two talents are being used to overcome an opinionation or a prejudice or something like that. Or out of struggle and prejudice, she's developing these talents, and these talents are to her good and to the good of the country. Now you see, it's very clear what we're doing here now. You can see this is a major problem of her life. But this gets into a major astrological problem. And it gets into something that I have never seen a clear exposition of an answer to this. If we look at this, Jupiter is the closest of these planets to the Sun. Now normally the Sun and Venus and Mercury and the Moon are considered personal planets. They deal with things that you can deal with. The Sun is yourself, both foci of it. So that's very personal. Venus is your personal emotions, your loves. Mercury is the concrete mind. And the Moon is even more basic and fundamental in its relation to nature. So we have a very strong aspect pattern that dominates the life of this person, but it does not enter into the personal consciousness. And that's a problem for some people. How would you relate to this individual? How would you understand what's going on in this individual? The way I understand it is we are much more than our person. We're much more than our physical being. And with the physical being, we have the capability, if we use it, of direct control. With the things in the outer planets, it is like indirect control. By indirect control, I'm sure that all of you have experienced it, but direct control is like you're riding along in a car and you see trouble ahead, so you tap the brakes. You're directly in control. But then there are things where just things in your life fall into place like they were meant to be. and you didn't do anything directly about it. And that usually happens when you are in touch with yourself in such a way that you have the attitude that God is in its heaven and all is well. And when you have that, everything happens as it should happen, and that is like an indirect control. So it's working on a part of the character of which we are not always completely wakingly self-conscious. Now, the way some astrologers deal with this, and I think it's a healthy way to deal with it, is they see the outer planets as being societal planets. And that she then, in her person, is something of a pawn to the society and to her generation. She was in power at the same time Reagan was, which was the beginning of the swing to the right. And it was the beginning of the swing to the right in England as well as it was in the United States. And her conservatism, especially her ideals of control and of exercising a cautious, positive judgment on things and being willing to solve problems through elimination, those attitudes were in her greater consciousness, if not always in her waking self-consciousness in such a way that she could deal with them like tapping on the brakes. Like in her higher consciousness as a spiritual being relative to the times, she represented those times and was in touch with them and was able to overcome that. Changed society of England. Now, if there was indeed a struggle, a political partisan struggle, that would be what would be indicated by the opposition, and the sextile trine that she has were such that she was able to manipulate within the opposition between the left and right with a rightist, cautious point of view from that wider consciousness. All right, does this make any sense to you? No.
Yeah, but I do have a question on something else. You said, what I didn't follow was you said 30, 60, 90.
Yes, it's the angle between, if you draw a line between Jupiter and Saturn, and then draw another line between Saturn and Pluto, those lines cross each other at 90-degree angles. And the angle of the opposition to the Pluto trine Saturn at the end of that line is a 30-degree angle, whereas there's a 60-degree angle between the line of Saturn and Jupiter. We're going to have a whole section on aspect patterns like this. A 30-60-90 triangle is a mathematics term. And it doesn't deal with the aspects, it deals with the kind of triangle that it is mathematically. Okay. All right. So you see what we're dealing with here. Now let's look at that one aspect that we haven't looked at yet, and that is the number 2 aspect, and that is Mercury sextile Jupiter. Mercury sextile Neptune, I'm sorry. And in that, they're both strong planets, and the aspect is certainly strong. The tool that she has, the reflective quality that she has, is strong enough to handle either of the planets, especially Mercury. Mercury isn't up to that strong. Mercury's about Neptune is about a third stronger than Mercury is. So this indicates that the psychic influences of Neptune are likely to be stronger than the mental part of it. If we look at it, at the work, Mercury is thought, articulation, adaptation. Neptune is sensitivity, strangeness, chaos. And this is a famous aspect. Mercury-Neptune aspects are tuning in aspects. It's like the concrete mind and the superconscious mind of Neptune when they're in harmony with each other, there is a tuning into something greater. It's a benefic, so it indicates that to some extent she's in control of psychic or spiritual energy in her life. It's a specific aspect, it is a sextile, so it's versatile, and it's likely to be quite flexible. The relative strength, it shows here that this has much more of a flavor, that her ideas are going to be considered weird. They're going to be considered different. And that might be because of the whole political bias that we have from looking at the other part of the character. And so what she gets presented with psychically or spiritually are other. They're considered different from what the world is doing. So by attribute, it's again cardinal fixed, and this is something that carries through a lot of her horoscope. It's a steady focus of sensitivity. It's an air and fire, so the sense there's a little bit more of a quality of urgency. Not only does the things that she draw in are not only they're psychic, but they're a little edgy, pushing. There's urgent that we have to take care of these things. And the signs are Libra and Leo, and obviously we're coming back to the sun in Libra in just a few minutes here. Obviously, this is something that she's lovable. You know what I mean? There are people who can spout off things that seem to be non sequiturs, or that seem to be really odd, and they can do it in such a way that they're lovable. And that's what the quality is that we have from these two signs. Looking at the opportunities, there's succeedent and cadent. So it's again another vicarious responsibility. It's a relational and expressive. So these are opportunities for working with people things. Like this is something that when she's not involved with ideology, as the triangle that we just looked at, the 30, 60, 90, that's involved with ideology and political philosophy and things like that. But when she's involved with people is when she has the best opportunity for tuning in on things. And the 9th and the 11th houses are the two most idealistic houses. So we get in a picture here of somebody that has a spiritual idealism. Application, it's applying, and it sort of indicates something that if she tunes in on something and she's open to it and she understands it, that opens her up to something more, and that has what is called a mounting or a building kind of receptivity. The first phase, again, she's a builder. We saw all of that looking before. And the special case is that the planets are octaves, and the key qualities of both of them come out. All right, now we want to put this together with what we've been looking at.
Neptune's an active.
Octave, but Mercury.
Of Mercury.
But Mercury
No,
is,
Mercury and Neptune are octaves.
Yes,
oh, octaves of each other.
yes, yeah.
Oh, that way.
All right. What we're saying here, looking at this aspect, is that one of her greatest qualities that she has is the ability to tune in on the big picture. It happens when she reflects. It happens when she interacts with other people. Now, this one aspect is different than the whole other three of the top four aspects that we looked at earlier with the 30, 60, 90, because those do not have anything to do with her person, her conscious person. Whereas because Mercury is involved, and Mercury deals with the concrete mind, it indicates that this is something that she can bring in. The others, she's just sort of brought through life with them. She happens to be a person of the times, I guess what you would call it, from the 30, 60, 90, a person who was born in partisanism and somebody that has a lot of political opinion, but that she is moved along by them, and she understands not in a waking conscious way, but it's just part of her. She understands that you have to control things, and you have to control things with a bigger picture. But those things don't always focus into her consciousness. What happens here, it shows that she is, by sensitivity, in tune with the general populace. And this aspect indicates that she can work with things without being maneuvered or manipulated by the greater forces of society, by being in touch with the psychic background, you might say, of society, and that brings it into her waking consciousness. So this gives us a pretty good picture of the way she functioned. Now what we want to do is we want to call back everything that we did last week, or the last time we met. We want to look at the solar aspects, because the sun is the sense of self. Now, the sun has as its strongest aspect the conjunction to Mercury. And so that when she does pick things up with sensitivity, she picks it up through the mind, and it gets to herself. And she is basically, you might say that Margaret Thatcher is an unconscious ideologue that is a psychic medium for the wishes of the people. It's a strange way of saying it, but I don't know what other words to use. That she, in her self-consciousness, she knows what she's doing is right because she has a sense that the people will go for this. She has problems in herself. She doesn't know. We saw that with the sun square Pluto and the sun square Jupiter. That's a T-square with that extremely strong opposition, and she can't control that. She probably has tried to control that, but she can't do it. So indirectly, she tries to work on that 30, 60, 90 triangle through a direct wielding of power with those two planets, but the sun is way too feeble to do anything about it, and she probably feels powerless through it. So she's most successful when she tunes into what is happening in society and gets a feel for what the times are, or gets a feel for what the people want. All right, does anybody have any commentary? Scott, you're a man that knew you were involved with news collecting at that time. Would you say that there is agreement with this?
Oh yeah, her and Reagan, the whole thing, it's pretty documented.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What?
See, because I don't know anything about this. I'm working completely from astrology. I know very little about Margaret Thatcher, period.
Oh no, you have her nailed just like you did Hillary. Well, my question is, are you doing astrology of the subconscious actually? Because
Some people, no, we're using a word there. You could use the word conscious. I would probably use the word unconscious.
Oh, okay.
But I would not use it in the sense that Carl Jung uses the collective unconscious, because he has a specific meaning for that. But it is, we're saying that she is in touch indirectly with the powers of the time, but not in her waking consciousness. Maybe she's out of the body, she picks it up and is heavily influenced by it. And it's possible with this one that she could be bringing things back from the other side with the Neptune aspects to both Sun and Mercury, that she could be bringing things back from the other side. I'm just saying that what we consider our consciousness, our waking consciousness, is very elusive. we don't recognize that it changes all the time, and that sometimes we are more conscious than we are at other times. And our waking consciousness is a very small part of our total consciousness, though we may not be waking in the total, because we are universal spiritual beings. And so we have something that relates to the whole business, even though we can't, unless we've had some great enlightening experience, or unless we can transcend and come to transcendental consciousness, we don't know that. And there are things that are taking place there. It's almost like battles between the gods in mythology. They have these battles back and forth, and it reflects into human activities, and we participate, but our participation is in a small way. And the participation of Margaret Thatcher was basically as, you might say, a destiny pawn. That doesn't mean to belittle her. It doesn't mean to say that she doesn't have any abilities or qualities, but that's what she is in life. And like the sextile and trine, like she wasn't completely political. She did a lot of political things that, in some parts of England she still hated for. She wasn't completely political. And the efficiency that she had, especially from the Pluto trine Saturn, to bring things under control rather than, like our country, I don't want to be either right or left, but our country's out of control and we don't know how to stop overspending. We shouldn't even need to have a debt limit. We should just stay within our own means. And if you have a debt for a short while and then you don't have a debt for a short while, if you're able to control, you don't need a limit like that. Yes.
I was just going to comment. Though I did not care for a lot of the things that she did, this is one of the few charts where, people always talk about the fact that Pluto and Saturn are negative and always malefic. It's one of the few charts where it comes across as really benefic.
Yes.
And in a way that's good to see, because then you see how it works positively, and that there is a positive side to all planets.
Yes. Good. I like that.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. We're going to be out of here in under an hour. Can you believe that? All we have now is we turn the aspect worksheet over and we look at the Woody Allen chart. It would be too much work, but it would be nice to look at the top 6 aspects because they taper so gradually. And the sun aspects, this is another case where the sun is not, the sun is not strong. It's one of the weaker planets. So what we'll do is just the top 4. And it'll be a much different kind of variety. We'll look at the top 4 aspects and number 8, 10, and 11, the ones that involve the sun, to see what he is in self. And the last sheet is a aspect analysis sheet. All you have to do is take it and make copies of it. I'm going to revise it a little bit. It's going to have all the same material on it, but I'm going to revise it to use space better and to make it a little bit less confusing. I'm actually going to move the composite under planet 2 and then move everything down a little bit. Now, isn't it, this is something that you can really see from this. I work completely from astrology on all of this, but you can see why having these relative strengths is so important. You can see how it all fits together that way, and you have a sense of proportion about the person. rather than just looking at this aspect and that aspect and that aspect. But you know which is stronger, who the players are, and how much of a handicap you have to give them, and such like that. All right, that's all I have for tonight. And we'll do the same thing next time with the 7 more aspects. And then we move on to something else. That'll probably be after Thanksgiving that we move on to something else. I think we'll move on to the parallel aspects after this section is over.
Next Thursday is Halloween,
Yes?
so you're not gonna be giving the kids the...
No, I'm not gonna, no.
Make sure the light is off out there.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because otherwise the kids swarming in here. I got nice kids in the neighborhood and I like them a lot, but I will only give apples, and a lot of them kids refuse the apples. I guess they've been told to by their parents because they might see me as the wicked witch injecting poison.
Yeah, right. Well, you could do the same thing to sweets.
What?
You could do the same thing to sweets.
Yeah.
Take the M&Ms and do them one at a time.
Oh, but the M&Ms, there would be a noticeable spot there. They said when they did Marilyn Monroe in that they injected her under the fingernail so they wouldn't